Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Baty for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes and it's another swift intro. As for episode 34, we really got into it with our very special guest, Matt Baty, choice shouter in the gnarly Pigs. Is that enough pigs? Or too many pigs? The finest purveyors of doom from the northeast, Pigs Times 7 have just put out their fifth album of ear-wrecking power, Deaf Hilarious, arriving in early April via their faithful home of Rocket Recordings. We caught up with Baty over Zoom to talk about the record, living his WWE dreams, and being in the orbit of Keanu Reeves. If you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform and follow Birthday Cake for Breakfast on all the socials. Right, on to Matt Baty. Enjoy.
I read the other day that they're going to can Zoom soon.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's pretty sure because I think Microsoft is this the way you want to start the podcast?
Let's do it. I mean, we were coming on to speak about Zoom anyway, weren't we?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, for an hour. It's yeah.
How do we find you today?
Good. I've just this moment clocked off from work, so I'm still in the office. So that's why I don't have a very it sort of looks like I'm in prison, doesn't it? Like the backdrop is it's a little bit underwhelming, isn't it?
If you are in trouble, just blink rapidly and
Yeah. I got my shank on my desk. I'll be all right.
the last time me and you spoke in real life for an interview was pre-COVID. It was at Six Music Festival in Liverpool.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I found it funny how normal it was that, like, there's Julia Jacqueline perusing the sweets and Charlie Tuna is grabbing a coffee over there. And it just seemed like a strange, like it was almost like all these famous musicians just waiting for a bus almost. I imagine for you personally, since then you've been in lots of those little scenarios with people backstage and all the rest of it. And I imagine you've had some very normal slash very interesting encounters with famous people.
You know what? I'm trying to think of like interesting encounters. Really, like it's weird when when you're at these things, it's like everyone's just kind of getting on with their own business, and their own business is usually just like making a coffee or eating some hummus on some bread. Like it's all so mundane. You might see some people and be like, "Oh wow, look at that, that's cool." Like I remember we played a festival a while back, and just from a little distance, it was like an artist's village kind of area. Yeah, from a little distance, I was like, "Oh, that looks like Lars Ulrich." Just thinking that there was some bloke that looked remarkably like Lars Ulrich, and then he walked past, and I was like, "Oh, that is Lars Ulrich." That's about as exciting as it gets, to be honest. Yeah, because everyone's just kind of pottering on, and I never really know, where people's boundaries are in terms of like getting giddy and excited in front of them. Like usually, I'm quite introverted anyway, so I tend to just let people get on with the business, and I'll gaze from a distance without it hopefully seeming too awkward.
I imagine as well, Lars Ulrich has just got like a sea of people staring at him awkwardly whilst he walks past. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. He was with a really tall lady. I remember that. Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. Like I often think that like I should have way more like really cool like road stories and things like that because people you being like a being a rock band, people expect you to have these like oh these wild tales, but honestly like the wildest stories we have are just kind of things where vans have broken down and we've had to launch some kind of insane mission plan to get to like the next show. But like, yeah, in terms of like something like genuinely interesting, it's not there. We all just sit backstage. We're all really tired until we go on stage and then we just like spring to life. And then we go back to our hotel rooms, try and get as much sleep as we can, and then we just pilot the van the next day. It's like really mundane.
Proper living the dream.
Yeah, yeah.
One such forthcoming adventures that you've got is playing Manchester in April. And
Mm.
the first time we ever saw you, or at least when I ever saw you, was upstairs at Star and Garter. Yeah, and the last time was the Ritz in 2023. And you'd said at that show that the first time you'd ever played Manchester, in fact, was like at a squat over a decade ago.
Yeah, it was. It was actually called like Crack House. Or, yeah, it was. It was called Crack House. It was started in the center of Manchester. And it was like one of these like old sort of industrial kind of mill style buildings. Yeah, some people kind of built like a bit of a like pretty decent like DIY kind of music venue in there. Yeah, and we played in there, and yeah, it was brilliant. And then to find yourself a few years later, in Albert Hall's just like, whoa, or like the Ritz. I actually lived in Manchester for a short while, for about like 3 years. I occasionally used to frequent the Ritz for their you used to do like rock nights and stuff, like nightclub style things, and I'd go there and like being in that room, the size of the room was just like wow. And then yeah, a few years later you find yourself there playing a gig with a band with a stupid name. It's still like it boggles my mind, the whole journey of it. Yeah, it's been that I think that's aside from I don't have many interesting road stories, but that journey in itself from like doing those kind of smaller shows and to kind of what we're privileged enough to be able to do now is like, yeah, that's the real like mind-blowing journey.
And even though you've both been on different paths, it was really nice. You mentioned the Albert Hall show to have Richard Dawson pop out at the start just by himself and do his stuff. And that was, incredible. And then obviously the lot of you have been over in the States and you've done this and that. And that must be so nice getting to do all these things with Richard Dawson as well.
I'm always a bit wary of having Richard perform before us because I know how powerful his music is and how just absolutely incredibly as he is as a musician and as a human. And I feel the imposter syndrome kicks
Yeah.
in, and it's a case of like, do we really want to play like after that? Because he's a showstopper. He really is. Like he's incredible. But the payoff also is that we've got a friend on tour with us and just sharing these moments with us, and that's brilliant. So yeah, having him out, the US shows were great as well because like obviously he's got fans over there as well, and that was his first time touring America, and so there were people kind of coming to our shows, and like the audience sort of flipped, like front of the audience for Richard, and then they moved further at the back, and then our contingency moved forward. But yeah, it was great, and it was great having him in the van, like traveling around with us as well, and I dare say he enjoyed that as well. Yeah.
That imposter syndrome, I mean, I can only imagine that he's been getting that on those recent shows with Mitski anyway.
I went to see one of those shows. Me and my partner went to one and we got good seats and it was packed to the rafters for Richard's set because you never really know. Like, I think it definitely varies from artist to artist and the audiences that they attract. Like, sometimes you'll go to like a bigger show and, there's only like 25% of the audience there for the support, to watch the support act. But that Mitski show, yeah, it was rammed, and I love Mitski's music, but yeah, the audience was, I think, very very different to what Richard has experienced before. Like
Yeah.
it was probably I'd say of a younger age, and also like a lot of females, like a really high percentage, which again fantastic. But it was it was great just kind of seeing him kind of tiptoe onto the stage and do what he does, and the audience were reacting like, so when you're watching like, oh well, I don't really watch these shows and you probably don't either, but it shows like Britain's Got Talent where they probably edit all of these sounds in, but when one of the performers does like something really cool in their performance and the whole like audience goes, ah, they were doing that for Richard. So when he was like hitting like sound notes and things, like, it was just this like it was like they were watching the Beatles or something. It was amazing. Like I've never really, certainly not for Richard and many other like singer-songwriters that I've maybe seen like live. I've never seen an audio like this is mid-song and the whole venue just lifts and goes, yes. It was really nice, but also hilarious. But it was brilliant though. I loved it.
Just knowing him as well, I can only imagine, like you say, it must have been hilarious, but also so great, just him being so G'd up by it all, but also being, I imagine, so bewildered, because like you say, like a proper Beatles or Britain's Got Talent reaction.
Yeah, it happened throughout the whole tour, from what I understand as well. And I think he did it maybe a show in Ireland, which was like, they did like an arena and the same thing. I wish we could get that, a bit of that, and when Adam like does like a really good solo and mid song, and our audiences just go, yes, that'd be good. I'll maybe start requesting that.
If you can jump on with Mitski, I mean, she's got some heavier stuff in her early material, and she, I'm sure you could.
Yeah, why not? I don't really rule anything out at this stage. Like we've had so many weird, unexpected turns and twists in this journey that yeah, why not? We'll play with Mitski. Very good.
Well, from Mitski to Paulie Shaw, I thought it was amazing that you were on that live podcast thing with Paulie Shaw, which just it made sense, but it also makes absolutely no sense because obviously he's had this huge career, since the 80s. But
Yeah.
then on the flip side to that, you also had visa issues whilst you were out in the States that meant you had to cancel a tour.
Mm,
So like you say, that higgledy-piggledy up and down route that you've had over, a decade plus, how mad was it and how mad has it been just building that following in the States and doing these things with Paulie Shaw and people like that?
yeah, it's been a weird one. When we first went over to America, I kind of thought that probably going to be playing to about like 50 to 100 people, and that would be a success, like, wherever we went. But yeah, the venues were filling up. The ticket sales were really healthy, especially in some of those bigger cities, New York and LA and Chicago, like places like that. And I was just blown away by the amount of people that were showing up that knew songs as well, knew the lyrics, knew the songs, and it's bewildering. And that obviously the booking agents and the promoters must have been really happy because quite like straight away after we did that first tour, they were like, right, let's do some more. So we were lucky enough to be able to revisit some of these places, and the venues got bigger and there were more people. I think like the because we did that KEXP like live session on the first tour. So I think that was also a bit of a catalyst as well. Like that kind of moved the dial a little bit, and that helped out the rest of the shows, and then subsequently the touring that followed. Like the numbers, like we just kept watching the streaming numbers of that video just like going up like monumentally, like day by day, and we were like, whoa, like what's happening here? So yeah, insane. And then you find yourself sat chatting to Paulie Shaw, which was a weird one, terrifying and hilarious, and yeah, lots of different things all at once. And then we got like whilst we were actually out in America. I'm gonna send you down a rabbit hole now. Like my big thing outside of music is pro wrestling. Absolutely love it. And actually, I ended at like a wrestling con event when we first went to New York on the day of our first New York show, like the first ever show we did in America. I was just like sat in the hotel room and I'd like typed in like wrestling events, New York. I, anyway, I bought a meet and greet with a wrestler, and I just thought I was going to go to this hotel and the wrestler would be there, and that was it. But I turned up and there was just like there were hundreds, thousands possibly of people, and I was like, oh, they're not all here to see this guy. And anyway, I ended up going in. I had an amazing time. Like, you don't really get many things like that in the UK. I like met a bunch of wrestlers, had photos and autographs and stuff like that. But yeah, on our second US tour, we got an email from Fox Sports who were doing the licensing clearance for the next WWE computer game. We're interested in licensing this song, Big Rig, for the next WWE computer game, and I was like, whoa! So we like sorted all of that stuff out, and then a few days later, we were playing in Brooklyn, and a guy like threw a Bret the Hitman Hart cap on the stage, and I wore it for a bit. I was like, this is good. But at the end of the show, I saw him, and I pointed to the side of the stage because I wanted to give it back because I didn't it was probably a moment of madness. He threw it on the stage, but it was a good cap. I want to assume that he was giving it to me.
You've got good values.
Yeah, so I said, hey, here's your cat back, and he was like, oh no, like I've got like loads of this stuff, like you keep that, that's for you. He said, I work for WWE. I was like, whoa, what? Like that's amazing. Like, what do you do? And he was like, oh, I'm one of the writers at WWE. I was like, whoa, okay.
Bloody hell.
So this is weird. I was like, so a few days ago we got an email about like licensing the song for the next game, and he said, oh well, like that has nothing to do with me, and like that actually the game is just like so far removed from WWE in a sense because it's a computer game company that are licensing the images and the music and the blah blah blah, and it's a separate company. And then there's a separate company doing all of the music licensing. He was like, it's not, but he was like, it's really cool. Like, let's stay in touch. A few months down the line, they announced the soundtrack. And I got an email from him saying, hey, like, you can see the soundtrack's being announced and you're on it. That's really cool. And I'd emailed back and I was like, look, I don't suppose there might be a chance that I could get like signed, like this is never going to happen again. Like this is like a 1 in a million chance that this could happen. I don't suppose there's any chat. I was like, I asked the Fox Sports people, and they said no. So I'm asking you, might there be a chance I could get like a signed copy of the game? I would love, like, and I would get it framed. And he was like, "Oh, I might be able to help you out with that. Just leave it with me." I didn't hear anything from him for months, and then I'd sent him an email. They were doing a show in Newcastle, the arena, and I'd sent him an email say, "Oh, I'm excited. I'm taking my nephew to his first WWE show. We've got tickets for this." Didn't get a reply. And then like a few months later, the night before the show, and I only checked my emails completely because my partner had an Amazon order that needed picking up, and she'd sent me an email to that email address, and I went on my inbox, and there was an email from the guy, and he was like, "Hey, keep checking your emails and check your phone tomorrow. I've reached out to Cody Rhodes's booking agent. Like they all the wrestlers have like their own agents and PAs and stuff. I've reached out to his agent and they're gonna try and arrange like a meet and greet for you and your family at the arena. So, and then a few emails above, I had another email from a WWE email address. And I checked that, and the guy was like, "Hey, I'm the live events promoter for WWE. Give me your seat numbers, and we'll come and get you during the interval." And I was like, "Whoa!" I was like beside myself. I was like, "Whoa!" So I sent him the seat numbers, and I didn't want to say to my nephew like, "Hey, we might." So there's a guy called Cody Rhodes, and he's the champ. Like,
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
kind of good guy vibe, squeaky clean, good moral compass, and yeah, but I didn't want to say to my nephew like, oh, this might, because I figured like the guy's running an arena show, he's probably thinking of 1,000 things all at once, all the time. There's a chance he might forget, so I didn't want to say to my nephew who's like 7 years old, hey, this is gonna happen, and then during the interval, him like looking around, and if it didn't happen, so I kept it quiet, but he did ask me why I had my computer game with me, but my nephew, and I was like, oh, you never know, we might bump into Cody Rhodes later, and I'll get this signed, and my nephew was like, no, we won't. We'll never, no, that's impossible. That won't happen. I was like, well, you never know. He was like, no, I know that's not going to happen. I was like, okay. So then I was like, right, okay, I really hope this happens now because I'm going to point to prove. And then, yeah, during the interval, guy in a WWE polo shirt, walking around, looking around, and I waved and went down, and it was amazing. They took us like down. He took us down by ringside, and then like along the aisle, and then through the black curtain. It felt like I was breaking the fourth wall. It, like through the black curtain into the backstage bit that you sometimes see on the TV with like all the monitors and the people sat around looking at the monitors, and there was a couple of other wrestlers there like limbering up to go out, and I was like, whoa, this is like surreal. And then yeah, we went into like a little dressing room, and he was like, oh, I'll just message, I'll send a message And a few minutes later, Cody Rhodes walks in with his full, the full costume on with the belt. And I was like, this is this is extraordinary. Because I kind of thought that we might be tacked on to like people you can spend like you can pay money for like an additional meet and greet thing, but it's like really expensive. And I thought we'd just be thrown into a queue of people and then, photograph and then off you go. But yeah, he came into this dressing room and he stood chatting with us for like 10 minutes about like the game and just life stuff and touring the UK and soccer teams. Like it was so weird. And my dad was in there as well because my dad had ended up coming with us, and like he's not a wrestling fan at all. He was just bringing my nephew up, and I was just like, this is so strange. Just having my dad and the WWE champion in the same room together is just like, yeah, it was it was very very odd. But yeah, so that was like one of the coolest like USA kind of things, but it all kind of tied round and circled back round to like happening in Newcastle. So like, everything came full circle again. I was like, I'm in Newcastle meeting the WWE champion. Like weird.
With your dad as well, your two heroes.
Yeah, yeah. With my dad. I regret because like we took a bunch of pictures like of me and my nephew with Cody. And my nephew got to hold the belt as well, and I was too like there was a part of me that was like I can't touch that. That's like a sacred thing. The lineage of it. I was like, I can't touch that. But then afterwards, like I started thinking about it. I was like, oh, my nephew got to hold the belt and I didn't. But yeah,
I
yeah.
bet the belt was like the size of him as well, being 7 years old.
Yeah, it was like when he got Andy, he was just like, "Oh, it's really heavy." Yeah,
Yeah, I thought, I mean, that is the most USA thing you can do post USA tour. Part of me did wonder whether you were going to say that, like, you were pitching the guy storylines and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Now that you've got his email.
no, no, no. Didn't get into any of that because I'm aware that like I'm very traditional with this stuff, and there is an element when I was watching it as a kid, I was like, this is real. Like if they can make you or make people believe that it's real, like it's real and it's magic. And so I want the same for my nephew. So not once did I ever discuss or make any suggestion that any of it was a work. Yeah, just stay clear of that. Plus, you never know. Like some of the wrestlers don't really like that either. They're of that same mindset of like, yeah, we're not going to break this kind of.
Keeping the kayfabe, yeah.
Yes, the kayfabe. Yeah, yeah. So it was interesting. I was trying to think of other things. Oh, actually, well, earlier on, you were talking about spotting people backstage or like any stuff. It wasn't backstage, but the first time and again, it was a very USA thing that happened. We saw Keanu Reeves in LA. That was that was exciting. When we played there for the first time, we were just like wandering around like the what's it called, like the Sunset Boulevard and all of those kind of places. And we were like walking along, and then there was like hundreds and hundreds of people like lining the street, and we were like, "Oh, something's going on there." Because and this was nice because up until this point, I was kind of like I felt a bit strange about LA. Like it's a really unusual place, and I couldn't quite I don't know. I wasn't getting a good sense of the the character of the place. It's really strange, and it kind of feels like some of its better days are behind it. Like and there were parts where we were like walking around, and I was like, not to disrespect, anyone from Blackpool, but it had that kind of vibe though, where a few decades ago this place was probably the place to be, and now it's sort of looking a little bit like it's a little bit worn. I think once you scratch the surface with a lot of places, there's some good stuff happening. Some places, obviously you might need to scratch a bit harder to find those, but most places you go, there are good people doing good things, but sometimes it's just a little bit more evident in certain cities or towns. Yeah, we were like walking along, and it was outside I think it's called the Chinese Theatre. They host a lot of premieres there. And so it was the premiere of John Wick 4. And so we stood there for a bit because we were like, something's gonna happen here. And these like black 4x4s kept pulling up outside. And every time, every one of them, there was just big screams. We couldn't see what was going on, but big screams. And then the screams would die down. And we stood there for longer. And then there was this one the biggest scream. But then it sounded like, and we stood there for a bit, but the screaming sound was getting like closer, and it was like it was moving along the line. And then all of a sudden, Keanu Reeves just appears in front of me for like, I look at him for like, it must have been. I've got a video on my phone. It's hilarious. There's, I don't know, 1 or 2 seconds at the most. I probably 1 second, and I'm right in front of Keanu Reeves with my phone like this, and I'm like, wow. And then loads of people from behind me pushed me out of the way. And they all had like posters and stuff to like try and get them signed. But I stood in front of Keanu Reeves for a split second, and that was good. And then I instantly felt much better about LA. I was like, that is the experience that I wanted from this place. That'll do. That was good.
I imagine there's footage somewhere of you just like on the red carpet, just eyes like dinner
Yeah.
plates, and then just getting like strong armed out the way.
Honestly, like it did, like just like that. No, I went straight back.
I kind of feel like just reverting to a showbiz podcast with you now, but I appreciate Rocket Recordings will want something more different.
They've worked with us for so long now, they know what to expect.
They, they're used to it.
Yeah,
But you've got your new record coming out.
yeah.
Deaf Hilarious. Is it still like, a mix of squeaky bum time and a load of joy when you've got a record that's literally this close to being released?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but we're like, what, 5 albums deep now. So for me, it's more just a kind of sense of anticipation about getting the live show like up to scratch, because it's a weird process now, because we end up like having to record the album months and months and months ahead of the release. So we go in, we record, and then we don't play those songs again for a long time. So then when, the album release is approaching, we're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to learn the songs we wrote and recorded like several months ago now. So you kind of go through that process again. But yeah, no, it's more just excitement, really. Like, I think the one of the best things for all of us, and like certainly for me, is like getting on the road and playing in front of people, and sharing the music in front of people. Like, because we obviously had that pandemic-y one where it kind of came out, and then it was nice in the sense that there was still people to chat to about the record and things like that. So it kept us a little bit busy. But then once that kind of, there's a bit of a shelf life to that, isn't there? And then people are moving on quite rightly to other new releases. Yeah, there was no like, I really, really missed that follow up of now we go out and we play in front of people, and yeah, we didn't have that. So yeah, with each one, like with Land of Sleeper and this one, there's been like an extra kind of layer of gratitude to have that, and that's the most kind of important aspect of it for me. So yeah, we just need to make sure we don't fuck up the new songs. I mean, that bit is quite scary though, because like, because we'll be like on the road straight from the off. So we've not really, to a degree, like road tested any of this. Like, the first show will be like, we'll be playing several new songs. We played a couple of the new ones, but there'll be quite a lot in the set from the new album. So scary.
There's your squeaky bum time. I suppose, you never really think about it, do you? But when you go to see a band, you are expecting if they've just put out the new record for them to hit the ground running with the new stuff. But I suppose, like you say, you never think about that whole having to park it for a bit and then having to relearn it again. It must be a strange cycle to get yourself into.
Yeah, you feel like you're in a cover band, tribute act, trying to learn like, yeah, somebody else's songs, but it's your own songs. Very odd.
Get a new vocalist in or get a new guitarist in or something like that.
I'm well up for that. Or if we could get like a vocalist in that will just like we can pipe in their vocals and I could mime. That'd be great. We'd be able to do so much touring if I was miming.
No sore throat remedies or anything like that.
Nothing. Be amazing.
You did put out your single Detroit, late last year, and I think you must have played that in 2023, possibly. I'm not sure.
Uh,
I think there might have
no,
been a new one.
we started playing it in we have played it a couple of times live, but more towards the end of last year, I think.
Right. But it's, so that's at least had some.
Yeah, it's had a little bit of an outing. Yeah.
So that was, what like kind of preceded the news that the new album was on the way. In terms of what it's about, it's said to be about the worst manifestations of male jealousy, resentment, and avoiding accountability. And the proceeds from the track ahead of that tour donated to domestic abuse charities.
Yeah.
Are you able to, expand a bit on like why this was the first single and what came to be in terms of choosing that to focus on topic wise?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in terms of like why it was chosen to be released as a single, I mean, we honestly we with a lot of these things, unless we have like a really, really strong opinion as to why a certain song shouldn't be selected, we generally follow like the label's lead, not just the label, but the people around us who we work with, and we kind of, we'll present them with the album and go, well, what do you think? Because sometimes, you end up being quite close to every song on the album, and sometimes what you might think is the one, it's like another person might listen to and go, whoa, like that's good, but probably not the single. And yeah, so I think it's quite important for us to kind of follow or at least listen to other people's opinions on that. Now, in terms of this one, I was very surprised that the feedback came back was like, okay, well, this can be the first single, but we're not going to announce. I understand why it was done. Like we announced the album touring with that single, but we didn't announce the album. But obviously, people smart, and they realize that there's a big old tour there. There is one new song. There's probably going to be a new album on the way. And it's weird. Like people in the music industry feel like they're pulling wool over people's eyes, but no. So yeah, but in terms of lyrics, because I mean, I was surprised that they picked that one because I mean, it's so sonically, it's quite abrasive, and also the lyrics are very difficult. It's not the word, but they're addressing some quite dark issues, right? And it's always one of those things where, like, I mean, with all of the lyrics I write, I really don't find myself as like a comfortable lyric writer. Like I don't write a lot of lyrics. I'm not constantly doing it. I only really do it when we have new music, and then I'll kind of bounce off the music. So with that one being so quite sonically quite aggressive and really pushy, quite scratchy and harsh, it kind of led me into that kind of that headspace. To a degree, what comes out comes out. I don't really set out initially to go, I am going to write a song about this. Like it just kind of starts to emerge, really. And then I can kind of keep kind of going round. And like if I can see a kind of some sort of rough narrative forming and kind of keep looping that round to adjust and change everything until it kind of makes sense in terms of being a set of lyrics. But I mean, it's hard because I don't want to get into too much detail on like the personal experiences. But there have, I know countless friends, who've had these horrible experiences under the guise of men. Like, and I know it's a hard one to try to like explain because I don't fully want to like come across like I'm bashing anyone who's got like mental health problems obviously, I hope that comes across that I'm not doing that. But I think sometimes, and it is always men from the the experiences that I'm hearing from friends and family members as well, and some of these experiences I have been like quite close to, and I've seen how this manifests, and I've also seen how it's quite shocking when there is like a horrible timeline of events that are happening, and it seems like the whole system in terms of like laws and regulations don't seem to be like fit for purpose anymore in terms of safeguarding the people that they should be. And I am drawing from something, again, I can't, I don't really want to, but surely this thing is the or this whole structure, it kind of became very, very apparent to me that the whole legal structure surrounding these issues are where they are because they were all designed by men. They were all written by men. These were written like with decades and decades, and it all needs some picking. And to do that, it's going to take a long time, but that's where we're at the moment. And I could see it happening, and it was so frustrating. So I was like, wow, like this really is how it plays out, right? Like there's people here acting in a really, really horrible manner, and there's not the safeguarding available to be able to, or the laws and regulations aren't in place to be able to make this stop, like, or help the situation. So yeah, it came from that, and it came from anecdotal stuff from friends and family as well. And it just kind of, yeah, it just came out, and I was like, so it must have been quite close. Like, I often think that like these things that sometimes I'll write a bunch of lyrics and it does take a little while for me to decode them. But what I do think is that like these things, whatever it is that comes out across the writing process, they're not above the surface, but they are quite close to it, and they're there, and they want to be expressed in some way, whether that's like expressing like frustration, or and I think like partly of that creating that character in that story or that persona is part of that process of like trying to tell the story, because it's a weird thing for me because I'm obviously identify as male, and I'm very aware that my gender is a big, it's very, very problematic, and I don't want to ever be seen as like you know try to take the voice away from people who because I haven't directly experienced these things, but I've seen like people around me going through like some really traumatic things or being in some really horrible situations because of it. So, it's important for me to not. I'm not trying to take anyone's voice from this, but I'm more just kind of reflecting back what I'm hearing.
And do you think it's important, just hearing you say that, do you think it's important for people at your level to be able to sing about that sort of stuff as well? To be able to vocalize that sort of issue.
Yeah, I mean I think it's important for anyone. I mean, to a degree, I'm of the opinion that like just everyone's doing their own thing. If you've got like issues that are close to your heart, and I guess also like having knowledge in it as well, or having experience or knowledge of it, like is important as well, rather than just kind of like virtue signaling. But if you do have like knowledge, experience, or whatever, or just a great passion for something, and you want to express that, then do it. But by the same token, I also think that like you know some bands or musicians are will see themselves as we're bands and musicians, and we're gonna if they want to sing about, I don't know, whatever it is. Like it doesn't have to be like a political or societal thing. Like, not every artist has to do that. Much in the same way as like every TV show or every film doesn't have to be political or any sort of commentary on, any societal issues. Like some of it can exist purely just to be fun and to offer like relief, and like that's all perfectly valid as well. Everyone needs that. So yeah, I think it's just more a case of like, you know, do what you want to do.
You've said previously as well, you find it hard getting things you want to express down on paper sometimes.
Yeah.
This was more around album two, and just from hearing you talk now, it seems that you've overcome that somewhat. But you've also said in the past, you find it hard sometimes expressing your emotions in your day-to-day life. So
Mm.
how do you find overcoming that in terms of lyric writing? Is that kind of like you say, when it comes to the record and it's going to be produced, that you can sometimes find it flowing out of you and then you can kind of piece it together?
Yeah, I think the music's the catalyst for me. Music from like a young age, it gave me an outlet. It was just like listening to it. I think the reason that a lot of like any art exists is because it helps people process emotion. Like that's what it's there for. Whether it's like the artist, well, the artist is the source of it and expresses an emotion through whatever it is, painting or a film or anything, piece of photography, music. They'll express that, and then the people who are listening, watching, reading, it helps them to process, and I think it's a very, very important thing. I think it's one of the reasons why we do listen to sad music and it makes us cry, or we watch a film that makes us cry, because then when either these things in the past that might have happened to us, or things that are going to come and are inevitable in the future, it's giving yourself, it's like training yourself in a way to like, this is how I process this stuff. And I think if you shy away from certain things, I think when these inevitable sad or distressing things happen, you're maybe less ready to be able to cope with them in the moment, because you've well, I'm not going to watch sad films because this, or so I often find it like in terms of music, find it quite perplexing sometimes, where I am sure, well, definitely, like knowing the output of Birthday Cake for Breakfast, you listen to a lot of different genres and different music, and obviously that will be expressing a lot of different emotions. And I often think it's quite like strange when people will say like, oh well, I don't like heavy metal, or 'cause it's angry. It's like, well, yeah, it's angry, but like it helps. Like, it's there for a reason, and it helps people process anger in a very, very healthy way, I suppose. And without that, then, the world would be probably a little bit more horrible, if there wasn't that kind of nice way of expressing that anger and that frustration. So yeah, in terms of like the lyric writing, so I've always like, music has always been that for me, like more so than like any other kind of art form. It's always been music, and music made me cry, make me feel validated in my anger or whatever it is. So like, yeah, being in bands was like the progression of that, and like it allowed me to find a way to express, emotion in a really healthy way. And Pigs is no different to that. So then when it comes to like the lyric writing, it's just a kind of like, yeah, the music's the catalyst of it. I know we are what we are in terms of like the sonics and the songwriting of what we do. It's quite thick and it's quite deep, and at times it is aggressive, and at times it's a little bit more celebratory. But within all of that, it does allow me like scope to kind of move around a little bit in terms of, so a song like Detroit does feel like a good canvas for trying to express a lot of anger and frustration into a certain area of my life, and or on behalf of other people, I suppose. And yeah, like, more celebratory songs, then I can kind of move it in a little bit more of a kind of positive direction as well. And, but yeah, it's music's always the music that the guys write is always the starting point.
On that, the music that the rest of the band write, on the last album, Land of Sleeper, guitarist Adam said that the sessions were almost like a religious experience to him at one point because you were all, firing on all cylinders and
Yeah.
working in such unison. The more you guys come together and combine with like however many records you're putting out and such, do you find that you're getting similar each time you get together and you do these studio pieces?
Yeah, I mean, so the last album, Land of Sleeper, that was the one where Ewan rejoined the band, who was our original drummer for he's on the very first album. Obviously, because we were coming out of the like pandemic and things like that. Actually, we hadn't. I think we'd only done like a couple of shows with Ewan, and then we were like straight into writing mode, and it was a bit like, oh, okay, like you Ewan's back in the saddle now. Like, he's an amazing drummer. He's incredible. Never had any doubts in terms of like his capability, but I suppose there was a bit of a sense of like, oh, okay, like, we're a few more albums in now, and like, how's this gonna work now? Because the dynamic, does in a band just kind of shift and alter over time a little bit. And then yeah, Ewan coming back in, and yeah, as Adam said, like it just felt like putting on an old pair of slippers. And it was like, oh yeah, this is like, yeah, Ewan's back and this is comfortable and he's like great. And then what we had after that was like a big, we did so much touring after Land of Sleeper, so much. And at the end of that, it felt like we were like, even though we'd not started really like writing new songs, but it felt like, we were a pretty tight, cohesive unit. And I think that came across into the writing and recording of the latest album. It's like, yeah, we were like full steam ahead with it, and it came together pretty quick. And that's kind of how we want it to be. Like, because for me, like, I think first and foremost, we're a live band, and that's how I want our records to come across as well as like I want this to sound like a band playing in a room that with a lot of energy. So yeah, I think we've got that with this one.
On that, pretty much what Sam said, Sam Grant, who's one of your own, and he's doing the production on this record as well, as he often does for your records. And I read somewhere that he said he wanted this record to be a slap in the face, as
Yeah.
opposed to Land of Sleeper being more of an immersive headphones experience. By the sounds of it, that was certainly what you achieved in terms of what you wanted and what you set out to do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, Sam always knows, like even like before we start the recording process, he like knows even from like when we start like collecting together the song ideas, like seeing how they starting to sit kind of side by side as we're playing through them. He's also like formulating like what he wants the production of the album to sound like. The rest of us are just like "Da, da, 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 da," rock riffs, great. But Sam's cogs are turning at that point, and he's like, oh, okay, well, this stuff is lending itself maybe to a little bit more of a like for him to push the envelope in terms of creating a little bit more of a pushier, more aggressive kind of production style. And yeah, that's where his head went with that one.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see as well as is this, with like where you want the record to be, the fact that you've got because you're no strangers to having people guest on the records, but the unexpected appearance of LP was, yeah, a shocker to see in the track listing. I read that it came about because your bassist John Michael Headley wrote what you considered to be the Pigs equivalent of a hip hop tune, resulted in conjuring up LP to come on. How was that process getting him involved? Because that's, a huge get, isn't it, really? But
Yeah,
also off the back of that, now that you've been able to get LP and you've had your previous collaborators on previous records, are there any big hitters that you'd want to collaborate with in future?
interesting. So, I mean, in terms of like the LP thing, it feels like just another wildly unexpected milestone that none of us would have seen coming. But yeah, we were in a studio in Wales, and Johnny had like this song, he was just playing it on his bass. And then like Ewan started playing this like, because he doesn't do like a lot of like closed hi-hat kind of more tighter sound. It tends to be like a lot quite expansive, like the stuff that Ewan's doing, but he's playing like a tight hi-hat kind of sound. Really nice groove to it. Adam and Sam were playing these quite like ambient like guitar parts, and I started putting like vocals to it, and I'm very aware of like my my limitations. I dare say I'm fairly good at what I do, but there is like, it is one lane that I've got. And I kind of said like, or at least I thought, I was like, if I do a whole song like this, it's in danger of becoming a little bit monotonous because it's me. And though it's usually at those points when I start to think about like, okay, like let's have is there anyone out there we can collaborate with? And because this thing had like so much space and so much groove to it, I was like, you know what? Hear me out. We could get an MC on this, like, and someone do something really interesting, like, because there's so much space for like additional rhythm in terms of vocals, but I am not that person. I'm not ready to be that person. So we drew together like a little wish list of like musicians to approach. And top of the food chain was like LP, Killer Mike, Run the Jewels, right? And I was like, I don't even know if this actually happened. Or when at the time I was like, I'm convinced LP followed us on Twitter for a moment a few years ago because I remember being quite excited about it. And I was like, oh, LP's following us on Twitter. That's cool. So we looked on Twitter and we were like, well, he's not following us anymore. So I don't even know if like it actually happened or not, whether I just had a dream. I've just got some dream memory. So then we recorded the song. We still didn't have anyone. And we were like, well, LP, we should try. We reached out to someone who we thought might have a contact for LP. And they came back and they were like, yeah, send over the demo version and I'll loop you in, I'll send it over. And it was like to LP's like personal email address as well. I was kind of expecting like no reply, nothing to come back. And yeah, we got quite a quick reply back, and he said, "Yeah, I'm up for doing this." And I was fucking hell, like what? I was like, "Is this all you need to do? Do you just need to email like fucking next album? We'll just find someone that's got Miley Cyrus's email and we just be like, oh, Miley Cyrus, you want to you want to be on the next record? Yeah, sure, no problem. Like it, fucking hell, yeah, came back and we sent him over the finished version, and I sent over the lyrics, and he was like, "Oh, this is kind of what I'm hearing from this, so I'm gonna go in this direction." It's like, "Yeah, you do what you want." But he did, he interpreted them great, and
You're like, stick to the script, LP.
yeah, 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 yeah. Came back, did an amazing verse. It was so weird, like seeing. It was a proper head spinner. Like when he sent back, the track and his vocals on, like hearing his just hearing his voice on like next to mine and on this song that we wrote was like insane, absolutely insane. But yeah, that's yeah. Apparently, you just need to send emails to people.
But did you ever hear that? Apparently, there's that Prefab Sprout album where it's got like some cracking harmonica on it, and apparently they just sent the tape because it was literal tape, back then, to
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder, and were like, "Could you stick some harmonica on this?" Didn't know him, and he was just like, "Yeah," sent it back, harmonica on it, and he's like, "Bloody hell!"
That's
Yeah,
amazing. I didn't know
apparently.
that. That's yeah, yeah, that's all you need to do.
So Miley on album 6.
Miley Cyrus on the next one. Yeah, why not?
Well, that kind of fits in with because I appreciate want to let you get out of work, but at that Rich show that we spoke of, you said at the time that pigs are in touching distance, albeit tongue in cheek. I appreciate, I don't want this to like you were really bigging yourselves up, but
Yeah, yeah.
you said that pigs were in the touching distance of the music industry taking you seriously, which great line. And then, you've got this LP rubbing shoulders with him. You're on a WE game. You were on a rock band game as well, which I'd completely forgot about. So, in a funny sense, even though you did say that, albeit tongue in cheek, does it
Yeah.
feel like you are kind of getting some traction? Not so much, the music industry taking notice, like you say, in a joking sense, but like it must feel good to know that pigs are making so many waves in that respect.
Yeah, I mean it's always gonna feel good and like really exciting. But like for me, like it always comes back around to like people are coming out and sharing these like live shows with us, then that's it. Like that's the thing. Like honestly, like sometimes I'll stand on stage and I'll have these moments of like, how the fuck, like how the fuck have we gotten here? Stupid band name, bunch of fucking riffs. How is this happening? Yeah, but I mean, it's always gonna feel exciting and good if you get an email back from LP who's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do a verse on this." Like, but it's just these things like you absolutely can't plan for them. Like Sam, I think summed it up. Like I remember we did an interview once, and Sam said he was like, "It feels like we're part of a computer game and somebody's learnt some cheat codes." And like there's these like yeah, just this like random bonus levels just pop in like you now have LP on your album. You've got a song on the WWE is like game soundtrack. Like all of these things that are just so unexpected that like yeah, it does sometimes feel like, you are in this like weird matrix and that somebody's just kind of occasionally just like throwing you these weird bones and you're like, whoa, this is insane. I've got honestly no other way of like interpreting it. Like it's yeah. But I think it's important not to like think too hard about it and just kind of not get too focused on like what next, what next, what next, and just kind of like yeah, it is cliche, but just enjoy the ride and mad things might happen along the way.
I do think that, yeah, if you were focused more and had that like industry brain, you definitely wouldn't have thought about LP. You would have been rapping all over that song. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would have been embarrassing. And like, yeah, yeah, that's the moment everything falls apart. As soon as I start rapping on an album, that's when you know. That's when you know it's properly, everything has gone to my head, and I genuinely think people are taking me seriously.